Hi, fourth graders. Happy Art Day. Welcome to part 2 of your snake project. So last week, you guys planned out what you want your snakes to look like this week. This week, we get to make the salt dough. We get to sculpt the snake, bake it, and then paint it. Now, if that ends up being way too much for you to do in one day, it is a lot of work to do. So if you want to just break it down into different parts, that's totally fine. Do whatever you have time to do. So for instance, today you could make your dough, sculpt your snake, bake it, let it cool, and then another day this week, go ahead and do the painting part of it, okay? So just a reminder that this is what my snake ended up looking like. I will have pictures of it. I'm really excited about the way that it turned out. I might actually use it in my garden. I don't know how well he'll hold up, but I might give it a try. So a couple of things. In the video, I tell you that I baked my, my salt dough for an hour. And I actually ended up having to bake it for closer to an hour and a half because mine were really thick. So it might take 2 hours, 3 hours. It depends on how big you make your sculpture. So if you make it, I mean, mine are pretty good size. So if you make it larger, you're going to have to bake it longer. So you are going to be baking these things at 275 degrees for anywhere between an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours. You just want to kind of keep checking on it. And again, please ask for a grown-up's help for that part of it because I don't want anybody to get hurt. Okay, so this week I'm just gonna jump right into how we make the salt dough and all of that. Just a reminder that we looked at the artwork of Charlie Harper last week, so that was kind of our inspiration for this project, and just to do something that has to do with nature and animals and bugs and creepy crawlies. So also, if snakes are not your thing, you can pretty much make anything out of salt dough. I just thought this was kind of an easy-ish sculpture to do, and kind of a fun one. So I can't wait to see what you guys create, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. I will be back in a minute to wrap things up. So to make our salt dough, you will need a half a cup of salt, and I just used regular table salt. You can get this anywhere. It's really cheap, so just a half a cup of regular table salt. You will need 1 cup of flour, just regular flour. I just buy the cheap stuff for projects like this. And then you'll need 1 1/4 cup of hot water. It should be as close to boiling as you can get it. So I just took this container of water and I microwaved it for a couple of minutes, and so it's really hot. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm just gonna take my 1 cup of flour, I'm gonna put it in my bowl. Okay, I'm gonna take my half a cup of salt, add that to the flour. I'm actually going to take my flour and I'm going to put just a little bit more in this cup just in case. There we go. I'm going to set that aside just in case my dough is just a little bit too wet. Okay, so now I'm just going to add the really hot water. And I'm going to stir. I'm going to use a fork just so that way I can get like most of the chunks out. You obviously don't want to use your hands because the water is really hot. It does cool pretty quickly. So I'm just going to kind of tilt my bowl towards me so I can kind of see what's happening. I can tell right now that this is probably just a little bit too wet. It's just not quite the consistency of clay, which is kind of what we're going for. So I can stir it just a little bit more, but I think I am gonna have to take just a little bit of flour. I'm not gonna dump all of this in. I'm just gonna kind of sprinkle a little extra flour on the top. And then I'm going to sprinkle Just a little extra salt on the top of that. And then I'm going to continue to stir. Oh yeah, that's gonna be better. I need to add just a tiny bit more flour. I don't want it to be so sticky where it's just gonna be sticking to my hands the whole time I'm trying to sculpt, because that's gonna be really difficult to manage. So I'm just gonna sprinkle a tiny bit more. Tiny bit more salt. And then stir. There we go. That's probably pretty good. So I'm gonna let this cool for just a second because I don't wanna burn my hands on the hot water. So I'm gonna let it cool for just a second. Then I can start sculpting with it right away. Okay, so now that my dough, my salt dough, is cooled down, it's still a little bit warm, but I can touch it. It's not gonna hurt my hands at all. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start making my sculpture with it. Now this is a lot of dough. You can actually make probably 2 to 3 sculptures out of this amount of dough. So if you don't want to do that or you wanna save some for later, you can always divide it up. I think for my snake today, I'm gonna need about this much dough, okay? And I may use a little less, but the rest of this I'm gonna put in a plastic Ziploc bag and I'm gonna squeeze all of the air out of it and I'm gonna make sure that the bag is shut really tight, and then this will be ready for me to sculpt with another day. Okay, so for the snake, what you're gonna do is you're gonna just start by rolling a coil, and I can kind of pinch and roll and pinch and squeeze. Now remember, when I did my drawing last time, I made the observation that a snake has different thicknesses to its body. So I'm gonna try to do that with my coil. I'm going to try to make one end a little bit thinner. So all I'm doing is I'm just kind of rolling that end a little bit more and I'm kind of pushing down on it. Move it over here so you can see it. Ooh, that's starting to already look kind of snake-like. And, oh yeah, I can curve it like this. I think that's a pretty good tail. And then I'm gonna start with the head. Now for the head, on my drawing and on the examples that I looked up, I noticed that it gets kind of skinnier around the neck area, and then the head is almost shaped kind of like a teardrop shape. So it's wider by the body and then gets thinner by where the tongue is going to be sticking out. So that looks pretty good. This is a little chunky in here, so I'm just gonna kind of smooth that out a little bit more. Okay, when I'm happy with the shape of my snake, I'm gonna start adding details like the eyes. So for the eyes, I'm gonna kind of push in just a little bit on the side here and a little bit on the side here. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm gonna, I guess, take the extra clay. So maybe you don't want to put it in a bag quite yet because I ended up needing it. I'm going to take a little bit of the extra clay and I'm just going to create an eyeball that's kind of sticking out there. If you don't want to sculpt the eyeballs, you could just wait until you're ready to paint them in, but it's a sculpture, and so we like to think about form and we like to think about shape. Those are 2 elements that we think about when we create sculptures in art. And so I'm gonna sculpt my eyes because I think personally it looks better with a sculpture. So all I did right here, I took a small piece of clay, I rolled it into kind of a coil, I flattened it out a little bit, and I'm adding that on for the eyelid of my snake. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I take a little piece of clay, I kind of roll it into a coil, pinch it a little bit, and then I'm gonna actually turn the snake so that I can see what I'm doing over here. And yep, I'm gonna go ahead and add the other eyelid. Okay, going to take my fork, you could take a pencil or something else, and I'm going to sculpt, I'm gonna carve in the pupil, the snake's pupil of his eyeball, right there. If you wanted to, you could also grab my pencil. You could also carve in, if you remember on my drawing, my snake had stripes. You could carve in your design, but you don't have to. You could just wait until you're ready to paint it and then paint the design in. It's totally up to you as the artist. I am gonna give it some nostrils, and then I think I'm going to give it a tongue. You don't have to give it a tongue, it's up to you. I just kind of want mine to have one. So I'm gonna roll a coil like this. I'm gonna kind of smush the end of it on the table like this. And I'm actually just gonna take my pencil and cut it in half because the tongue of a snake, the snakes have like those forked tongues. And so I'm going to add that. And I'm just gonna add it in on the bottom here and kind of smush it in. There we go. Okay. I'm going to finish adding my stripes to the snake, and he's almost ready to bake. Now the baking part is going to take some patience. They need to bake for about 40 minutes before they're ready to be painted. So you'll need to bake them for 40 minutes and then let them cool before you paint them. All right, almost done. And I'm just, as I'm doing this, I'm kind of going through and I'm smoothing out some of these little pieces that are starting to stick out a little bit because I want it to be smooth. It's gonna make it easier for me when I paint it if it's nice and smooth without all of those extra little pieces sticking out. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and put him on the cookie sheet and get him ready for baking. And I will show you how I do that, and then I will show you how I'm going to paint him. All right, so now that we have sculpted our projects out of the salt dough, they are ready to be baked. You don't have to wait for the dough to dry out at all. You can just pop it right in the oven. So my 4th graders did snakes, my 5th graders did creepy crawly bugs or beetles. So I have my oven preheated to 275. Please ask for your parents' help with this. I don't want anybody to get hurt, but you do need to preheat your oven to 275. And like you can see, I lined my sheet with foil just so my sculptures don't stick to the pan. I'm just gonna go ahead and stick that in there. And I know I said earlier that it was going to take about 45 minutes to bake, but because my sculptures are a little bit thick, I want to make sure that they bake all the way through. And so I'm going to leave mine in there for about 1 hour. So 60 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and push start, and I will come back and check in on those after 60 minutes to make sure they're baked all the way through and are ready to be painted. So I will see you back in a couple. Okay, so now that our sculpture has been baked and it has had time to cool, I am ready to paint.
Today I am going to be using acrylic paint. It looks like this. You can also get it in those little tiny craft bottles. I realize that not everybody is going to have acrylic paint just laying around. I paint a lot, so I happen to have some. If you do have it, I would recommend using this. If you don't have acrylic paint, you could either use tempera paint, watercolor paint. You could even color on these with Sharpie, although it might be a little bit tricky. You could use washable marker, but again, it might be tricky and I don't know how well washable marker will stay on here. So really I would recommend this, but again, if you can't get acrylic paint, then you can use whatever you have available to you at your house. Okay, so I have my colors already set and I'm going to just look again here at my plan that I sketched out last week. So my color scheme is going to be blue and orange. I think I'm going to stick with that. I really like it. I think it's going to look really nice. And so I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. You can change it up if you want to, or if you go grab your paint and you realize you don't have the colors that you used in your drawing, you can feel free to change it up. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and start. I have my cup of water right here. I'm gonna make sure my brush isn't too wet. You can see there's a little leftover orange in my paintbrush. I just finished painting my 5th grade sculpture. So I'm just gonna grab some of the orange and I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. And I'm gonna start down by the tail, and this is all you do. It's almost like painting on a piece of bread or a cookie or something. It's kind of funny. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I get all the way around, especially because this is a snake. And so that I don't have to keep rinsing my brush over and over again and grabbing a new color, I'm gonna go ahead and just get all of the orange done first. Then I'm gonna go through and do all of the light blue, and then I will go through and do all of the dark blue. So I'm gonna go one color at a time. So I just have to be careful to make sure that I'm paying attention, that I know exactly where the orange is supposed to go. And if I make a mistake, it's okay. I can always try to turn it into a happy accident. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed up the video so that you don't have to sit here and watch me paint for hours. And I'll be back.
Hello again, 4th graders. I hope you enjoyed that video. Again, just a reminder, I know in the video I said that I only baked mine for an hour, but it ended up being closer to an hour and a half. So depending on how large your sculpture is, it may take a little bit longer. So email me with any questions that you have. I know this is a little bit of a crazy project, but hopefully you guys are able to find the salt, flour, and the water so that you can put together your salt dough. So it's just like working with clay. It's pretty awesome. You can make just about anything with this. I mean, you could make a vase, you could make, I've seen people take the salt dough and they roll it out and they make leaf imprints. So you can do just about anything with the salt dough. So I can't wait to see what your snakes turn out like. And I will have your maps questions for the assessment for this week. Those will be listed in Google Classroom, so you can check there to see what those questions are that I'm going to be asking you this week. I hope you have fun, and as always, happy art day!